asking Mikey to take the roll.
All right. Mr. Beard. Here. Mr. Core. Ms. Duncan. Here. Mrs. Frost. Here. Mr. Long. Dr. Marshall.
Here.
Mr. Martin. Ms. Parker. Here. Mr. Perez. Here. Commissioner Robinson. Here. Mr. Rude is not here. Mr. Stavros. Here. Mr. Temple.
Here.
Mr. Tripp. Here. Dr. Yost. Vice Chair Hosseini.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning. I want to start by saying how excited I am to chair my first board meeting and how much I'm looking forward to working with this wonderful board. We have a great board here and with amazing talent, and I have served on a lot of different boards, and the commitment demonstrated by these board members is extraordinary. We are a little bit like a family. We may not always agree with each other, but we, I think, have great respect and fondness for each other, and that's what's important. As you know, we were scheduled to meet at FAMU today, but the meeting location was changed at the university's request. The Board of Trustees and the administration of FAMU have a lot on their plates, and hosting our meeting would only been a distraction. I appreciate Chairman Badger from FAMU coming here yesterday and addressing our Academic and Student Affairs Committee to provide us an update. And I know that everyone in this room is deeply saddened by the death of Robert Champion, such a young and talented student, and what a needless death. Our prayers and condolences go out to the Champion family. I want to thank President Barron and the incredible staff from FSU for stepping up and hosting the meeting. We appreciate the warm welcome that we have received on this visit. And President Barron, I'll turn it over to you for any welcoming words.
I thought I would welcome you just by telling a quick story. Quite a while back, I had the opportunity to give testimony in front of the U.S. Senate. And Senator Chafee, the senior one, was the chair, and he came down off the dais at the end with Jeff Sessions, the senator from Alabama, and he said, "Would you like to go to lunch?" And I would have missed my plane to go to the Senate dining room with two senators, and I went in and I had lunch. And Chafee said, "You know, there are just not enough educators who are willing to be elected to public office, and there surely are not enough scientists who are willing to be elected to public office." And he was going on about this because the educational issues and the complexity of issues are so great that are being faced. And so finally I piped up and I said, "Well, Senator, I'm an elected public official." And he said, You're a scientist? You're an elected public official?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I just got elected in my second term on the school board." And he said, "Oh, my God, how awful. Your political career is over." And he said, because everybody cares about education, everybody has an opinion, and sooner or later, someone is going to disagree with some vote that you take because you take so many and you're so public about what you do. And of course, I didn't serve on the school board because I was aspiring to higher public office. I did it purely because I believed in public education. And this little story is my way of welcoming you by thanking you for your service. It is our pleasure to host you here at Florida State, and we will help whenever this board requests it. So welcome. And I also want to publicly say that, you know, I have a great staff, and they did just step right in there, and I just want to publicly thank them for what they've done. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your remarks. It was a great story. Since it's my first meeting, I'm going to do something that normally I leave to the chancellor, and I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes. I promise I won't do this very often, because I prefer a good debate, a good discussion, and I enjoy that, and I respect that. And so, but nevertheless, I think I ought to say a few things about what's on my mind in my first meeting. As we all know, the 2012 session kicked off last week in Tallahassee, and all of us look forward to working with the House and Senate, as well as Governor Scott during the session, all of whom have demonstrated they care deeply about higher education. In his opening remarks, Speaker Cannon spoke about his commitment to higher education and building a system that will ensure the future prosperity of our state rather than continuing down a path that he described as aggressively racing to mediocrity. Speaker Cannon spoke about the constitutional role of this board, but he also said that we are unsure about how to exercise our authority or execute our mission. Speaker Cannon has asked Chair Bill Proctor and the House Education Committee to engage this board and the presidents of the universities in a dialogue about the system of higher education in Florida. I, for one, welcome that dialogue. I know that this board stands ready to work with Speaker Cannon, Chair Proctor, and the other members of the House, as well as President Herodopoulos and members of the Senate, and Governor Scott, in addressing the challenges facing higher education. I want to touch on a couple things that are important to me. First, I want to say something about quality. We live in a state where we need to increase access to higher education. We need to increase the number of graduates. We all know that we need to increase the number of our STEM degrees. But something we also need to do and talk about is we need to increase the quality of our universities. From the outset, I should say that I'm very much in favor with working with the Florida college system to address the quantity and access issues. This board needs to continue our dialogue with the Board of Education and with the legislature to make that possible. Kathleen Shanahan, the chair of the Board of Education, I know will welcome that dialogue, and I'm sure Commissioner Robinson will as well. What I also want to do is develop a roadmap for our universities to become great. I believe that is one of the purposes of Chair Proctor's meetings with each of our presidents. Our research universities need to be given the tools to recruit the very best faculty in the world to teach in our universities and to conduct research in our state. Likewise, our universities that are more focused on teaching need to become the very best teaching universities in the country. While we may have some work to do, we have a head start in a lot of areas. I have a couple of slides here. I'm not real good. I'm not an academic, so I'm not as comfortable with this as it. But let's look at where we have to let's look at our SAT scores. What I have here is a bar for the top 10 public universities, the rankings for 11 to 25 and 26 to 50 in the ranges of their SAT scores. If you look at this, you can see that the University of Florida is number 18 and doesn't have far to go to get in the top 10. FSU is in the top 50. UCF is not far below the top 50. But we've got work to do to get our 5 institutions in the top 50 and to get a top 25 program at every university. That prior slide was the upper 25% quartile of all these universities. So, I'm encouraged by those that SAT slide. If you go, I'm also impressed with the progress we have made on our graduation rates. We highlight our graduation rates as one of our key system achievements in the annual accountability report. Our state is in the top 10 nationally for overall graduation rates and the top 6 nationally for minority graduation rates. When we compare systems, we are 4th. That accomplishment is a reflection of the hard work of everyone, students, faculty, administration, and the boards of trustees. They've all been working hard to improve these graduation rates. While we are moving in the right direction, we still have a lot of work to do, however. Half of our institutions have 6-year graduation rates below 50%. That has to improve. We learned a lot about why that may be happening, and it has to do with people working full-time and still trying to keep a 12-hour credit load so they can get financial aid as a full-time student. There are a lot of reasons for this, but we got to get it better. But we're making progress, so I think that's a good thing. We're also making progress on R&D expenditures. Florida ranks 4th in the country, and the state university system has grown faster over the last 10 years than any other state in the top 10. However, individual universities need to ramp up R&D efforts because only Florida and USF have R&D expenditures that compare the top 50 public universities in the country. On the faculty side, I want to talk about the number of National Academy members and faculty salaries. If you take a look at this slide, you can see where the average of the top 10 publics is 70. I think it's 76. You all don't have this number, but I believe it's 76 National Academy members is average. That's a little bit distorted because Berkeley's got 219, which is an extraordinary number. But Number 10, the smallest number of National Academy members, is 32. So University of Florida, which has 23, would need to hire 9 National Academy members to be at the bottom of the top 10, and would need to hire over 30 to get in the average of the top 10. That's a huge way to go. But it can be accomplished, but it takes resources. It takes financial resources. It can be accomplished. Our other universities, however, have a long way to go to get in play on these things. The average of the top 50 is 10 National Academy members, so we have a long way to go in that regard. Let me take a look at the faculty salary issues, because there may be a link to some of this. Right now, the average salary for a full professor at University of Florida is $122,000. That salary is not even close to the average salary of $145,000 for the top 10 public universities. In fact, $122,000 is the average salary for full professors at institutions ranked between 26 and 50. It is not surprising that our institutions that don't have more National Academy members, because we don't pay enough. If you look at these salary numbers across the line at all of our institutions, you can see we're significantly below where the top public universities are in the country. We got to improve that if we want to get better. The annual report that we approved yesterday sets forth a lot of this information, and it tells us where we are today. In the strategic report that the strategic plan that Frank Martin worked so hard on tells us where we want to go. And Dr. Ari Laban and Jason Jones and the rest of the team have done a really good work on those two documents. So I think we're pretty good, but we can get better. So I want to change subject to something else that I think is related to all this, and that's financial aid, because the way we're going to get better probably includes increasing tuition. In the last 5 years, state support per student has dropped from 70% to 54% for the system, a loss of $521 million. Over that same time, tuition has increased by 51% and now comprises 46% of the funding per student. Yet, our tuition is still really low when compared to the rest of the country. Only 6 states have lower tuition rates than ours. It appears obvious to me that in these economic times, tuition increases may be the only potential source for new revenues for our universities. I accept that because I don't see an immediate alternative, and because I don't want to stand still or worse, participate in a race to mediocrity. But I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the students in this process. Our number one focus is students, and we must continue to be aware of the impact of tuition increases on students, especially middle-class students who do not qualify for Pell Grants. This issue is tied to another real problem that students across the country face in these tough economic times: increasing student loan default rates. I firmly believe that we will not reach our quality goal or the degree production goal that is part of our strategic plan if we fail to tackle financial aid. I'm almost done. I do want to say something about governance. The events of the past year across the system have forced me to better understand the significant responsibility provided to this board in the Constitution. Think about what we're charged with doing. We must operate, regulate, control, and be fully responsible for the management of the whole university system. Those are weighty responsibilities. Recent events have forced me to acknowledge how we have delegated many of our duties, this board's responsibilities, to our boards of trustees. Speaker Cannon is right when he says the responsibility for ensuring a successful higher education system was given to this board by the constitutional referendum that voters passed in 2002. But he also realizes that currently we are limited by the extensive delegation of powers that took place in 2003. I would encourage this board and staff to think about whether we are currently playing the role that was intended for us when we were constitutionally created. I have spoken with the Speaker about this, and he has encouraged this reevaluation. To be clear, I have no desire, nor do I recommend assuming the duties of the boards of trustees. Many decisions must be made by the local university boards of trustees. Those local boards have weighty responsibilities under the Constitution as well. the Constitution provides that the local boards must administer the universities. But on the other hand, I believe that in certain situations, this board must be able to weigh in and to provide the leadership that the Constitution envisioned for us. Most importantly, the board needs to be engaged when things go bad. We have a bully pulpit, and we should use it. And we should not forget that the authority of the Constitution was given to us, and we should not hide behind what may have been a too broad delegation of power to avoid the tough issues. And I have no doubt that the members of this board are willing to tackle tough issues. Certainly the past 90 days has proven that to be the case. It makes me so appreciative of the leadership that we enjoyed under Ava Parker, who made sure that we made difficult decisions in a thoughtful and deliberative way. On more than one occasion in the past few weeks, I have wished that Ava was still sitting here. I said at the beginning I don't like long speeches, but I did want to take some time this morning at my first meeting as chair to say a few things that are on my mind. I believe that we can develop the best system of higher education in the country if this board works cooperatively with the legislature and the governor and reaches out to the business community for its ideas and assistance. The legislature and the governor have shown great interest in our universities and higher education over the past year, and we should welcome that attention. And, of course, it is critical that we visit with and listen to our faculty and students. I cannot imagine a finer group of people to tackle these issues than the 16 of you, the chancellor, and the wonderful people we have in the board office to make us look so much smarter than we all are. So that's it. I'm done. And so before I turn to the chancellor for his remarks, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of our last board meeting?
So moved.
Any changes, additions? All in favor say aye. Aye. And can I have a motion to approve the minutes of our last foundation meeting? Any changes, additions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Okay. Thank you all very much. Mr. Chancellor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your thoughtful remarks this morning. I know everybody appreciates it. I had the occasion to stop, unfortunately it was only a few moments this morning on the way in, to speak with a group of students who were gathered outside. I wish I had more time, but we had kind of a lively dialogue about tuition, revenues, representation. These are, as we all know, interesting times. I've been through my share of recessions, as many of us have around this table, some of us being older than others. This obviously is the toughest that any of us, I believe, have ever seen since the Great Depression. And by virtue of that fact, the decisions that everybody around this table is making, and those that are being made by the people over on the other side of town right now, are some of the most difficult decisions that have ever been made. But it was great to have the opportunity to look those students in the eye this morning, because it is always good to be mindful of why we do what we do, whether we're a paid employee like me, or whether we're a volunteer, that everything we do, from setting policies and regulations to implementing process out there at the universities, at the end of the day, is all done for one reason, because every day we assemble 325,000 students, undergraduate, graduate, research students, who come together not only to acquire an education, but ultimately to use that education to go on and live a good quality of life. So I appreciate what everyone does. We had a conversation, Governor Long, about representation. And I tried to explain, I'm not sure I did a very good job, but I tried to explain that representational government is just that, that we ultimately create a governance structure and we send people off, good, bad, or indifferent, to represent us. And they represent huge numbers. I maintain that the 17 people on the Board of Governors, in effect, are representation of 19 million Floridians in terms of what decisions are being made on behalf of higher education at the state university system level in Florida every day. Governor Long is actually, when I look at him, I see 325,000 students sitting there, because he is the representative who comes to this table to make those decisions. Governor Yost is representative of thousands of faculty members across the state system, and each of you is representative of the entire state. So these are tough times. They always are, I suppose. Tougher by virtue of the economic circumstances and what we all face. And I know that this board is committed to trying to just simply do the right thing. So we look forward to continuing to work with each and every one of you. I will get out of your way quickly by just providing a couple of announcements. First of all, we have thanked Florida State University, but again, because this is the regular meeting, some of you haven't been here, we once again want to thank Florida State University, Mr. President, members of your board, but you're a smart president and you did it. The members of staff who actually are the great people who do all the legwork that goes along with putting these things together. The omelet bar was a nice touch this morning. Unprecedented, I think, in Board of Governors history, and duly noted. But this was a quick call, as my chairman mentioned, because of the quick turnaround time. Anytime you host a Board of Governors meeting, it is a big deal for the people on the ground to try to coordinate the logistics. When you stop and consider this was a quick turnaround because of the decision made, couple that with the time of year, and there arguably is no more busy time of the year than right now, FSU has done a great job here, and we appreciate it very, very much. Very comfortable and very accommodating. We thank you for that. I also want to say a post-thank you to the University of Central Florida by way of next comment. President Hitt and his folks were kind enough to host recently, a week ago, National Science Foundation Day at the University of Central Florida. This was an opportunity to bring to the Sunshine State representatives of the National Science Foundation. When we talk about increasing our research portfolio, among many possible ways to do that, clearly one of the most important is to increase the work that we do collaboratively with the National Science Foundation. They are a major source of research funding for universities all across the spectrum. So we took the opportunity, and working with our staff, the staff of the University of Central Florida, brought to Florida and hosted at UCF members of the National Science Foundation to come and talk about the foundation. What do they do? How do they do it? What are better ways to engage with the NSF when we are seeking research awards from them? And was it successful? Over 350 participants were in the ballroom at the University of Central Florida. And not my words, the gentleman representing the National Science Foundation made the statement in his remarks that it was the largest National Science Foundation Day that they've ever had. That is a big deal when you're talking about a group like the NSF. But again, we wanted you to know about it, not just because of the volume of turnout, but the dedication by our universities to figure out how to build a better mousetrap when it comes to seeking access to greater research opportunities for our university system. And we thank, again, UCF for hosting that. It was an extraordinary event. We also hosted at the same time the meeting, and you'll hear more about it, of the oversight committees, both that of the University of South Florida and of this board, regarding the evolution of the Polytechnic campus, and that went extraordinarily well. And again, thank you for that, President Hitt, and I'm not going to steal Governor Husseini's thunder on that one because I know he's going to bring you more information about that in a moment. Just a couple of other thoughts. One, we have put together our chief financial officers to create a linchpin dialogue on the issue of PICO. One of the things that I was talking with our students about this morning, one of the students thoughtfully pointed out to me that, and this is completely understandable, students are confused as to how their tuition is going up, and yet they will see a brand new building going up on campus, and they wonder how that irony exists. I told them the state just took care of that. There won't be any new buildings going up on our campuses for the foreseeable future because we have now zeroed out our PICO allocation. And by virtue of that fact, until we reconcile that, our ability to build additional classrooms and laboratories has obviously run into a roadblock. It is another sign of the times and another sign of the complexity that we face with trying to find the resources both to hire faculty and staff for services and classes, and at the same time meet the needs of a growing state university system with a brick and mortar that goes into the construction of additional classrooms and laboratories, as well as the money necessary to keep up the classrooms and laboratories that we already have in place. our CFOs are going to create for us a dialogue, and they'll be reaching out to others, obviously presidents and members of local boards and a host of other resources to try to see if we can continue to refine this process. There's two parts to PICO. One is the revenue to build, but the other one is the process that we use for PICO that determines what projects are queued up for construction and how that process unfolds. And while the Senate did some work on this over the summer, and we hope to see their report soon, we think it's important that we thoughtfully reflect on this whole issue and see if we can come up with some ideas, not only for revenue, but also how we can continue to look and refine our process to make sure that the process is always in lockstep with whatever revenue stream exists in the times we find ourselves. One last thought, and it's by way of introduction. Last night we had the good opportunity to pay tribute to Mikey Bestaberti, who is completing 31 years, and many of those years as corporate secretary of the Board of Governors, and we thanked her for her service appropriately. What we did not do was introduce her replacement. Oh, I don't know if one ever can really replace Mikey. Someone follows, but can you ever really replace Mikey? I think not. But we're very fortunate that we have on our staff someone who is a remarkable person in their own right. One of the brightest folks I know. She is an attorney by training. She has worked in our office for a number of years, and she is finishing her PhD, so she will soon have more letters after her name than alphabet soup. But she is also a very reasonable individual, hard worker. She understands the role of our board and will assume the position of corporate secretary, and that is Manoka Venter. So Manoka, if you would stand up and just let us put a face with a name and also welcome you to that position. We're delighted to have you in it, and I think the board will be served enormously well by having you there. Welcome aboard.
Okay, great. Terrific.
So that's it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go out a little bit out of order. We're privileged this morning to have with us Will Weatherford. Where is our speaker designate? Please come up to the podium, sir. We've had no better friend of higher education the last few years than our speaker designate, and he's written us a letter about some ideas he had and asked if he could come speak with us, and I would like you to come speak to us at every one of our board meetings. So
well, if y'all serve breakfast at everyone, I'll be here for sure. I can tell you that.
Well, I think what FSU has done is aspirational for all the other universities that are.
It's a great sign of leadership.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to be brief. I don't want to spend a lot of time. You have a lot of important work today, and I want to congratulate you on becoming chair. We've worked together for many years, and going back to your advising of the former governor and working on tuition differential together, and we worked very hard to do some good public policy there. I enjoyed that, and of course, we've had a wonderful chair of the Board of Governors for many years, and Ms. Parker, thank you for all your service, and very happy that you're still on this board and going to continue to contribute. A lot of people think you have to run for office to be a public servant, that somehow people have to validate you by election. I actually think the best public servants in the history of our country and of the world are people who were not elected. And so your service as a board, as a volunteer, to spend this much time and effort to try and govern a very complicated, a very important part of our state and of our future really speaks to your character. So I thank you for what you're doing. A lot of friends on this board, and just very happy to be here. I think the future of our state and the diversification of our economy and where we're heading as a state is probably in your hands as much as it is anybody's. I think that our state universities themselves are the catalyst for the long-term economic future of this state. And so that is a heavy load. That is a lot of weight that is on your shoulders. And something that came across my desk that I'd never heard before, but really put in perspective for me the challenge you're facing, and that is that in 2010, the top 10 jobs in demand in this country, not a single one of them existed in 2004. Not a single one. In 2011, the top 10 jobs in demand, not a single one existed in 2005. What that means to me is that your job is harder than it's ever been, because now you're governing a system that is overseeing a university system that is trying to give a talent pool to the workforce for a job that doesn't exist yet. We are literally trying to train students for jobs that aren't existing. And that is a more complicated thing. That is something that we have not seen in our culture or in our age, but it's here. And we have to adapt to that, and that's why I'm here today, and that's why I wrote you a letter. You have a lot going on right now. You're managing a multi-billion-dollar budget. You're managing new accountability standards. You're managing a new day, so to speak. I thought your comments, Mr. Chairman, were great. I thought Speaker Cannon issued a challenge to this board, and I think that you guys are up for that challenge, and I look forward to working with you on that. But for those of you who didn't see my letter or didn't read it, I'm just going to give you a brief summary as to what it stated and as to why I wrote it to you. In your strategic plan that was published in November of 2011, which, by the way, I thought was exceptional, there's a quote from the 2025 vision section of that, and it says that the state university system must advance innovation, new technologies, new processes, new products, and new ideas. And I could not agree more with you on that. So I wanted to throw out an idea. I basically wanted to start a conversation and plant the seed here and allow you to do with it whatever you may. But in looking at the capacity challenges that we have, and looking at the fact that the top 10 jobs in 2010 didn't exist in 2004, we have to look at educating in a different way. We talked about PICO, the challenges that we have there. So what is technology's role in helping us come out of this situation? What is technology's role in helping us change it? According to the Florida Trend, in 2009, over 26,000 students took online classes solely. That's the size of a university. Over 50% of the 300-plus thousand students took an online class last year, or in 2009 as well, and those numbers have gone up rapidly since then. I could not get more recent numbers from them, but I'm sure it is continuing to go up rapidly in double-digit increases. What I'm suggesting to you today, and something is nearly a suggestion, you will never see me out there doing anything beyond adding my input, but this is something I'd like for you to look at, and that is that if we ever get into a situation again where we are considering increasing capacity within the state university system, maybe the answer could also be not just building a new university, a 13th university, maybe the answer could be a completely online university, 100%. A university has no walls, no football stadiums, no parking garages, nothing. The only thing it would have is it would have the educational content that would be delivered in a 21st century model and would be student-centered based on what they need in the time frame that they need it. Now, a lot of people here are already in the online business and do a wonderful job. Our state universities do a wonderful job in online learning. But there's no central focus. There's no entity in the state of Florida that is putting a sole focus on online learning. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the fastest growing part of our education system. Only 25% of students in America are traditional students today that live in dorms, live on campus, go to the game, join the fraternity, be a part of the institution. 75% of the marketplace, of the consumer, is in another world. They want this flexibility, and I think there's a way for the state of Florida to give that to them. Florida has led in online learning in K through 12, and just this past year we had over 140,000 students take online classes in our high schools. And we have led on that front, and I believe we can continue to lead when it comes to higher education. It's my understanding that the state university system and the Florida college system has been working together on an alignment of online services, and I think that is wonderful. The creation of somewhat of a new clearinghouse, so to speak, where information would be available and would be a delivery model for online learning. And I think that's a great idea. I would just challenge this body, and I would challenge our universities to get out of their comfort zone, to look at online learning in a completely and fundamentally different way. Is there something that we could be doing that we're not doing right now? All that being said, you are the Board of Governors. I will support 100% what your decision is. But I would like to just plant the seed that if we can look at how we're delivering education in a different way, maybe we'll find that there's other methods to do it other than the ones that we're doing right now. There was a great quote that I love that was by my great man Charles Kettering, and he said, "There exists limitless opportunities in every industry. Where there is an open mind, there is a frontier." I think we are on the frontier of online learning. I think it's going to change the way that our country works. I think it's going to change the way our world works. And I think Florida should lead the country in that endeavor. I will leave it to you, Mr. Chairman, and the board to do what you want with that, but I appreciate you giving me a few minutes. You are doing a wonderful job as a board in very tough circumstances. I was joking earlier that I'm not sure who's had a tougher job over the last 90 days, you or me trying to draw maps all over the state of Florida. Both have been hard, equally hard, but both very important. And I just thank you for giving me this opportunity. So if there's any questions, I'd be more than willing to answer them.
Let's ask. We've got you here. I want to keep you here. So
Yeah.
Any board members have any questions? I have made a commitment to the speaker designate that we will absolutely respond to this request and give it our best effort. And if it requires hiring consultants, we'll talk to them about how to do that. But we ought to do a good job at taking a look at this. Ann?
Thank you again for joining us and for all your leadership on this. One just kind of clarifying question, because I'm excited about this challenge. When you're do you have any particular existing models in mind, Western governors or anything else out there? Or are you kind of, can you help frame a little bit of our thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's a lot of models out there. Certainly Western Governors has a role. I think they're already in Florida to a small extent. And we've had some conversations about Western Governors, and they bring some interesting value. But what I'm thinking of is much bigger and broader than that. What I'm thinking about is, I'll give you one example. What you would do with this would be of your own device, so to speak. But to me, I could foresee a year from now, after maybe you hired a consultant, maybe we gave you the funds to do so, and you came back with a plan and you said, let's go out to the private sector, public and private sector, and see what's out there. Maybe you did a request for RFQ and you saw who was out there. Maybe the University of Florida wants to be the leader in online learning in the state of Florida. Maybe they want to partner with another research institution. Maybe somebody outside the state wants to come and partner with the institution in Florida. Maybe it's a combination or a collaboration of all of them. I don't know what it is. I almost feel like it's limitless. I don't necessarily want to define it, but I think the opportunity is so big, and I think that it's so primed and ready to go that if we were to just ask people, if we were just to seek counsel from people around the country and around the world of what is out there, we would be amazed at what we would find. But thank you. It's a good question.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you well know, our high school students in Florida are now required to graduate with at least one online course, and so we've created a culture and a generation of Florida where they're used to online learning. Number two, at the post-secondary level in Florida, a number of online courses. I think you're actually probably 2 or 3 steps ahead of most who are thinking about a 100% online university. You're right, first time in American history where the majority of our students are now traditional, and many of those non-traditional students are also working students. And so this is a great opportunity for us to bring back into the workforce people who will need certain skills and credentials to be able to add to what the governor wants to do of 700,000 additional jobs. So I definitely support your initiative.
Thank you, Commissioner.
This is great. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, yes. 2 things. First of all, we look forward to working with you. Representative and I had a great conversation about this not long ago, and I think many of the things we discussed yesterday as a board are going to work beautifully as we ascend into these activities. So we look forward to working with you, especially during your speakership. You're going to be instrumental in helping us as a partner to accomplish many of these activities. The second thing is just a heads up. Yesterday, as a part of our nominating and orientation process, we had a group of 9 new members of boards of trustees who were here for a full day orientation. We were talking about early on relationships, and one of those being obviously with the legislature. And one very nice young man who's now on the board of Florida State University was asking me who he thought perhaps would be a great person to reach out to in the legislative process to find out how it all works. So you can be expecting a call from a fellow by the name of Alan Bentz very soon. Just seemed like a nice young man. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. And just want you to be aware of that.
I always thought he was over the hill, but that's on to you. That's okay, Frank. No, thank you, Mr. Chancellor. Thank you, Chairman. I really appreciate the opportunity. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't, of course, recognize my wonderful aunt, who's Alan Bentz's sister, Judy. She keeps me straight, too. So, Judy, I hope I didn't say anything you didn't like today. Okay, all right.
She's terrific. Yeah. Oh, yes, Judy.
It's on. Okay. I just wanted to congratulate Speaker-designate Weatherford on the governing magazine had announced that Speaker-designate Weatherford is one of the 12 lawmakers to watch nationally. one of 12 nationally. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Of course, she didn't mention what they said to watch for, but that's I'll solve that later. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your meeting, and thank you for giving me a few minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We're going to move on to the State University System Economic Impact Study. We're going to skip over the Higher Education Coordinating Council for a couple minutes. Is Dr. Harrington here and ready to go? And Dr. Hodges? Dr. Julie Harrington is the director of FSU Center for Economic Forecasting and Analysis, holds a doctorate in economics and an MS in fisheries from Auburn University and a BS in fish and wildlife management from Montana State University. Her current research interests are directed toward the areas of energy, environment, advanced technologies, economic development, and education economics. She is a member of the Florida Climate Institute and is also a member of the FSU Institute for Energy Systems, Economics, and Sustainability. Dr. Alan Hodges is an extension scientist in food and resource economics at the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, where he has been employed in various faculty and staff positions since 1985. He also holds an affiliate appointment in the UF School of Forest Resources and Conservation. His faculty appointment is 70% extension, outreach, and 30% research. His areas of research include economic impact analysis, market survey research, agribusiness management, environmental economics, and biomass energy resource development. He directs the UF program in economic impact analysis, where he has participated in projects with total funding support in excess of $5 million since 1999. He has served as the chairman of the Green Industry Research Consortium of university horticulturists and economists, organized as a multi-state project of USDA CSREES. So welcome. If you all would come forward and provide us your economic impact study results.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. We're thrilled to be here to have this opportunity to present the results of our study. My name is Alan Hodges, and I'll be making the presentation today. Dr. Harrington is here with me to back me up in case I get into trouble. This study came about really quite recently, just 2 months ago, really, and so we put this together under pretty extreme time pressure. But I think it's important to understand the economic impacts that of higher education. As you all know, the governor and the legislature really are keenly focused on how universities support economic development and create jobs in our state. Our study is for fiscal year 2009-10, and this is an update to a study that was done about 10 years ago. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to see our report. We delivered it to the Board of Governors staff just a week ago, and we're going to be working with them closely in the next weeks to revise the report and make that available for use with the legislative session this year. Well, to begin with, of course, everybody knows the State University System of Florida is among the largest in the country, with 11 institutions, 30 different branch campuses, over 80 million square feet of building space, over 40,000 acres of land, over 300,000 students enrolled, over 200,000 full-time equivalents, and in 2009-10 produced over 73,000 graduates with college and advanced degrees. Also about 58,000 employees in the system statewide. To give you just a brief overview of how we put this study together so you can appreciate some of the effort that went into this on the part of our joint team at FSU and UF. We started with the State University System Consolidated Financial Statement for 2009-10, and then that was supplemented by more detailed information available from the Board of Governors staff. We evaluated impacts in 4 key areas: university operations spending, payroll spending for employees and staff, capital improvement expenditures, and then student spending, and then perhaps the most important part of our analysis was an evaluation of the earnings generated by state university system graduates in comparison to high school as the baseline. The student spending information came from cost of attendance data, broken down by undergraduate and graduate enrollment, and on and off campus living and home residence. We're careful to evaluate sources of new money coming into the state of Florida, which represents additional final demand and stimulates greater economic activity. Money that's already in the state and spent by residents is treated differently because that's a transfer from other things that they could be spending their money on. The employment and earnings data for state university system and high school graduates came from the VET-PIP outcomes report, the Florida Educational Training Performance something or other program. It's really a great resource that's tracking the earnings and employment of graduates over time. We estimated the present value of their lifetime earnings differential over a 30-year work life using the U.S. Census Bureau methodology, and also took into account the share of university graduates that remain in the state after graduation based on a previous study by OPAGA. I believe it was about 55% of university graduates they found remain in the state after eight years after graduation. And then we evaluated the regional economic impacts of spending using the IMPLAN economic modeling system that gives us regional multipliers and estimates the share of spending that occurs within the state of Florida for personal consumption spending. Just to then obviously a key part of our analysis was to look at the number of degrees awarded by state university system institutions in 2009-10. Overall, it was over 73,000 degrees, of which about 72% were bachelor's, 21% master's, 2.8% professional degrees, and 3% doctorates. And you see in the chart there the distribution across the 11 institutions. Looking then at the earnings and employment data, you see here the on average about 60% of state university system graduates with bachelor's degrees in the fall of 2010 were found employed. So just within the same year, almost 2/3 of our graduates found employment within the state. Compare that with less than 50% of high school students who found employment. So clearly, a university degree is giving our graduates a much better chance of finding a job. Not only finding a job, but earning more money, and that's the key. The average equivalent annual earnings of bachelor's students in Florida that year was $36,500, and it goes up the scale. Professional students over $70,000. The overall average is about $42,000. And then if you look at the earnings differential compared to high school students, bachelor's degree students are earning about $15,000 more than high school students. Master's students over $37,000 more. PhD students over $45,000 more, and professional students close to $50,000 in greater annual earnings. This chart shows the trend over time in average per capita earnings for high school and state university graduates. Notice that the growth in earnings 2, 3, and 4 years after graduation is growing somewhat more rapidly for university graduates than it is for high school graduates, and that's a key part, another key result. Using the Census Bureau methodology, we estimated the present value of average individual lifetime earnings over, we assumed a 30-year career, but take into account the different ages at which university graduates entered the workforce. And you can see there that 10 years out, master's students have a present value lifetime earnings of a little over $200,000. At 20 years, that rises up to about $575,000, and then at 30 years, just over $500,000. For professional students, the numbers climb much more quickly. At 20 years, they're at $1.2 million, and over 30 years, they're at over $1.8 billion. So then, to briefly summarize the expenditure information in our studies, here you see the expenses, total expenses attributable to university operations, university payroll, capital improvement spending, and by the way, that was taken from the cash flow statement rather than the income statement, because as you know, these capital appropriations can get spent over several years, so we focused on just what was actually spent in fiscal year 2009-10. And then student spending and the value of graduate earnings differential that as labor income that eventually translates into spending in the state economy. You see the total spending that year was a little over $44 billion, of which about $42 billion was actually spent in the state of Florida, and then almost $36 billion of that represented new final demand spending financed from sources, new money coming into Florida from outside the state. We treated the earnings differential as entirely new final demand. The argument is that this is the result of the human capital investment that the state university system is making in these students. This table summarizes our total economic impact results of the regional economic multipliers applied to the total spending. You see there our estimated total output or revenue impact is just a little under $80 billion. That's billion with a B. The value added, which is a subset of that, about $52 billion, and that represents the additional labor and property income and taxes generated, and it also represents the contribution to the gross domestic product of the state of Florida, which is, if we just take the $52 billion value added, divide that into the gross domestic product of the state, that represents about 7.25%. So you can think the state university system is accounting for a little over 7% of all economic activity in the state of Florida. It may not seem like a high percentage, but when you consider that the state of Florida has a gross domestic product of over $750 billion, and it would be the 15th largest largest economy in the world, even a small percentage represents large value. Labor income and other property income are also detailed in the report. Indirect business taxes paid to local, state, and federal government agencies in Florida, a little over $4 billion. And then probably the most important result of all, the total employment impact of 771,000 jobs generated in 2009-10. Over 770,000 jobs in the state of Florida that year could be attributed to the activities of the state university system, and that's almost 7.9% of all jobs in the Florida workforce. The last two slides just summarize the distribution of employment impacts across all of the 11 institutions of the state university system. University of Florida stands out as the largest, about 190,000 jobs. What can I say? The Gators are great. Kind of a second tier of impacts for FSU, UCF, and USF, all at about 110,000 jobs. And then you've got a third tier, FIU, FAU, and UNF, in the range of 30 to 80,000 jobs. The value-added impacts look similar, the same rank ordering pretty much as for employment. For UF, it's about $12.5 billion in value-added contribution to gross domestic product. FSU, UCF, and USF, about $7.75 billion. FIU, a little under $6 billion. FAU, a little under $4 billion. So, in conclusion, I want to emphasize that this study captured the economic impacts of state university system operations, payroll, capital spending, student spending, and the present value of graduate earnings differential, according to our scope of work. State university system graduates have significantly higher employment rates and income earnings than high school graduates in Florida. The present value of a bachelor's degree in Florida is about $550,000. For a professional degree, it's close to $1.9 million over a 30-year working career. The state university system generates employment impacts of over 770,000 jobs annually and contributes 7.27% to the Florida gross domestic product. The employment impacts measured in our study for 2009-10 represent an increase of 2.7-fold, more than 2.7 times what it was in fiscal year 1998-99 as measured by a previous study done by Lynch and colleagues at FSU. It's important to recognize that our study didn't capture all the potential economic impacts that might be measured. For example, we didn't look at, because of time constraints, we weren't able to look at the visitor spending or technology transfer activities. In a previous study we've done for University of Florida, those two things together represented over 10,000 jobs. So it could be, I would say our results are probably conservative, but it would be our recommendation that this type of study be continued in the future, and that future studies should incorporate those additional types of impacts. So with that, I'll stop and be glad to try to answer any questions.
Thank you. I know we have some questions. Maury?
I have a question. So what's stated here that if you graduate with a bachelor's degree, you make $15,000 roughly more than a high school graduate. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Well, that high school graduate, if he graduate from the high school and start going to work, so he's going to have a 4-year head start because that student going to getting a bachelor degree. Have you separated the what kind of bachelor degree that will, and what differences could it make? If somebody is a computer science degree and somebody gets a degree in history, what is the difference between those two degrees and a high school graduates?
Honestly, I don't know. We didn't look at that specifically in our study. We just analyzed the results for all university degrees in aggregate. But that information is available from the FETPIP outcomes report, and that certainly could be done. Also, to your point about the different timing of people high school and university graduates entering the workforce. That was taken into account in the Census Bureau methodology, which takes into account the average age at which people enter the workforce and in their lifetime earnings potential.
Was that also taken into account the tuition that these students pay? And
The cost of tuition as netted out of their lifetime
That's right.
earnings, no, it did not.
It did not. I think it's hugely important for us to see and know that what difference does it make? I mean, how far? What's the level? Is it 15,000? Is average? I understand, but what is, like, if you get a degree in history or whatever, or you can get a degree in engineering, how far the difference that this delta is. I'd really like to get that information and to see the differential difference and that brings up the point of, and I've been talking to STEM until will show, I think, a much bigger difference that if you get a degree in a STEM versus others. Because I can tell you, in an institution that I'm involved, our graduates in engineering get a huge. First of all, I agree with you. One of the biggest positive things to get a bachelor's degree is you have a 5% unemployment. And if you have a high school degree, our unemployment is at 10% plus. Well, I agree with that. But also, I think it's important for our students to know when they graduate with the different degrees, what is the potential income to them between the degrees that are being offered to them.
Absolutely. We do have that information available, and we'll be glad to share it with the board.
I appreciate that.
Actually, if I might, that particular issue is being taken up. What we would like very much to do, beginning as soon as we can, is have available the salary ranges for all of the different degrees that exist, and ultimately, once it's all cleaned up, make it available, figure out which is the best vehicle or what are the best vehicles to make it available to students up front and then during the process, so that they will know that as they make their degree and then therefore career decisions, what sort of potential earnings there will be if they chase one degree over another, and then build that up front so they'll have availability of all of those different pieces of information in their decision-making process.
I mean, I think it's very useful. A guidance counselor can sit down with the student and say, if you don't want to continue with your education, you're going to have this much of a difference in earnings. And also, let me share with you, if you go from this degree to this degree, these are the difference also for that student to make the decision based on what his ultimate income is going to be.
Yes, sir.
If you were asked, if your scope was to determine return on investment as opposed to impact, would it be different?
It would be somewhat different. Return on investment is a somewhat different economic concept than economic impact. Return on investment is more of a programmatic type analysis. We would have to look in more detail at appropriations to the universities from the state and in relation to these economic impact indicators. But it certainly could be done. The past studies I'm aware of, the one that Dr. Lynch did 10 years ago, I believe estimated a return on investment of about 2.5. A more recent study done just 4 or 5 years ago indicated the return on investment was approaching 3. So it looks like the return on investment may be increasing over time.
Okay. Just to follow up,
Yes.
similar to Governor Hussaini's comments. I wonder if we talk about taking this further, whether we might have a conversation about methodology, because there's a huge range, I think, in terms of the kind of path we can take here and what we're searching for. You know, impacts versus ROI, you know, flavors of degrees, what is really the market demand, because a lot of these assumptions assume things stay constant, which they don't. Speaker Designate Weatherford just said so. So it'd be fun to talk about methodology. And this is instructive, but I think it's scratching the surface in the direction of metrics that we could ultimately get to that could be instructive.
And I think one of the things the governor is looking for is full disclosure to our kids when they enter the system, so that they know when they make a decision. So I think we need to do the best we can to give the best information to our kids as early as possible.
Mr. Chair, some of that is stunted. The doctor mentioned FEDPIP. I've been in government for 35 years. I still can't figure out what FEDPIP stands for either, but I do know, because I've worked around it for years, it's a significant service to the state, because they do some amazing tracking and statistical analysis. But even the folks at FEDPIP will tell you that they're limited. For example, when we look at job placement after university life, FEDPIP currently does not track out-of-state students. So the amount of information that we have relative to that statistic is stunted at only those who graduate and work in Florida. Why is that important? Because as more and more of our work spins off of good data, good statistics, and good decision-making from that, it's going to be important that that very issue, Governor Corr, that we look at first what it is we do want to analyze. We come up with common denominators and numerators to make sure we're consistently tracking it. And I think we're going to find out that not only do we have a wealth of information, but that there are also challenges that exist out there to make sure that we've got the most accurate information based on our ability to acquire it. And in some ways, that's stilted today.
Ava?
I guess the question I have is about your, I guess the pool generally. So I know we're talking about SUS graduates, and I didn't know, you know, given that we have so many of our state colleges who now also offer baccalaureate degrees, I didn't know whether that, you know, you looked into the difference between the bachelor degrees that are, you know, provided via our state colleges versus, or whether your study was just focused on the SUS graduates.
Madam Governor, we just focused on state university graduates and compared to high school graduate. We considered that to be the baseline for comparison. The information is available for community colleges as well, but we did not consider that.
Okay. Anything? Yes, sir.
Yeah, the Department of Education, we actually have data from our career and technical centers that provide the data for income that you would receive if you graduated from high school, went directly into the workforce. Depending on which route you take, there are oftentimes you can earn more money than someone with a bachelor's degree, particularly if it's in a humanities or social science. So we have data to at least support the high school side. And for the Florida college system, at least 2% of our graduates earn a baccalaureate, so we've got some data there as well.
Great. Governor Tripp?
Do we have information that really sets forth, first of all, within the state, the actual kinds of jobs and number of jobs available? Are we playing off of that? I know we're talking about, you know, wanting to graduate all these people, but do we have the round holes to put those pegs in that we know? You know, I've been told that clearly high school graduates, technical graduates stay in state, probably bachelors, but to jump up, that PhDs look nationally. And so the question, I wonder if it would be interesting for us, or the information interesting for us to have, is what is the game out there that we're trying to fill the positions in? First of all, within the state, than maybe within the region. Is that something, am I talking about something that makes sense?
Sure, that makes sense. There are projections available of demand for certain educational specialties and occupations that are made every year and updated by the Florida Agency for Workforce Innovation. That's our state Department of Labor, based on trends, recent trends in employment. So those numbers are certainly available. They're broken down by the occupational, according to the occupational typology that they use. It's not strict, doesn't necessarily correspond strictly to our academic disciplines, but you can kind of fit it together pretty well. You make a good point that the higher the educational level in general, the greater is the likelihood that a graduate from our university system will leave our state, because the more specialized you become, the more you have to seek a larger marketplace in order to capitalize on those skills. And that's just an inherent problem with the system.
Much like the doctors who go out and get their residencies in other states and don't come back. It'd be interesting to see kind of an overlay, if we could at some point, about what we're producing and what the real demand and need is out there, and let our students kind of know that. Here's where you're trying to fit in, and there's already an abundance or not, you know.
I was going to say, we obviously have more work to do in this area, and we need to do it. So